New York is probably the most internationally known city, and surely this city is on the list of places to visit for any traveler. If you think about it, this city is so interesting because, in the first place, you might bump into the Ninja Turtles coming out of the sewers or Spider-Man swinging through the skyscrapers, among hundreds of popular culture figures that are portrayed in this great city. It has been the scene of endless events that have had worldwide relevance, such as the one we all know took place in 2001 and changed airport security standards globally. Besides being the financial capital of the world's largest economy, moving truly ridiculous amounts of money on Wall Street where the stock exchange is located, and many other things that if I continued, I would never finish. As we can see, this is undoubtedly one of the most important cities in the world, if not the most important. All this gives the city a mysticism and value that attracts an average of 45 million international tourists, who, added to the same local tourists, result in an economic spill of approximately $80 billion. Impressive, don't you think? In addition, by itself, this city generates so much money that it would be among the top 20 countries by GDP in the world, ranking among countries like Australia, Mexico, Spain, and Indonesia. Yes, considering we are talking about just one city, this is truly impressive. But what am I getting at with all this? Well, after giving you a bit of context, here is where I start my problem with New York, and we begin with the city's terrible infrastructure. Here you might say, what the heck are you talking about? Can't you see the endless impressive skyscrapers that touch the sky and have the most interesting architectures? And of course, New York is a jungle of beautiful, historic to the most peculiar skyscrapers, but the problem with skyscrapers is that it is private infrastructure. You get lost looking at the sky with its skyscrapers that you don't see the terrible conditions the streets are in. You will find trash on the streets because in many parts there are no alleys, so the trash is collected in front of the buildings. This gives the city a dirty image. The streets have potholes and are cracked everywhere, this due to the extreme weather the city has during winter and the salts and chemicals that are placed to dissolve the snow in winter. Although the weather is something that cannot be controlled, there are indeed ways to keep the streets in conditions like they do in other countries where strategies are implemented to keep the streets in similar conditions to those of New York. Also, the streets in some parts are too narrow and saturated with traffic, the latter due to the poor road infrastructure the city has. The city is not made to support the capacity it needs, causing it to be among the cities with the worst traffic in the world. Continuing with the city's infrastructure, we continue with New York's public transportation, which is one of the largest and most complex systems in the world, serving millions of passengers every day. With 472 subway stations, parts of the subway system are very old. Entering a subway station in New York is like traveling to the 80s, but if there had been a zombie apocalypse, because they are very dirty, filled with plagues like rats and pigeons, they are unpainted with broken parts, etc., and in my opinion, necessary renovations and constant maintenance are needed. Even the same trains or tracks have problems, which can lead to constant delays and temporary closures. Also, during peak hours, the wagons are saturated, in addition to not being the safest in the world, having constant robberies, or finding people under the influence of substances, who knows? The point is that the subway, despite being indispensable for the functioning of the city which, remember, is one of the most money-generating in the world, has a transportation system that is really on its last legs. And remembering that using a car is a headache due to excessive traffic, it seems impressive and extremely mediocre that the transportation system is not in condition and is safe. This is the public infrastructure that most mortals depend on, along with millions of tourists who are surprised to see this. Cities like Tokyo, Japan, Toronto, Canada, or Moscow, Russia, are just some examples of successful public transportation which go through challenges equal or worse to those of New York, being that New York generates more money. Isn't that interesting? New York is the perfect example of capitalism, because those who have money enjoy good infrastructure, which is private, and those who do not have must accept to use all the infrastructure we already mentioned, added to the water and sewer network. The electrical system, which is old and can cause blackouts, bridges, and tunnels are also old. This makes me think that the city in terms of public infrastructure stopped being built in the 80s or before. Mostly, all the new infrastructure in New York is private. We are talking about plazas, skyscrapers, and monuments. Very interesting, don't you think? This left me thinking.
Si te está gustando el video, por favor ayúdanos dándonos un like para que el algoritmo se lo recomiende a más personas. Muchas gracias.
Continuing with the city, we will realize that the streets are not the safest in the world, having large areas that even become percentages of the city where the simple act of walking down the street is dangerous. Neighborhoods in the Bronx, some parts of Brooklyn, and certain areas of Manhattan and Queens have been pointed out at various times for having higher rates of violent crimes or property crimes. Although it must be mentioned that crime has decreased over the last decades, it is clear that they are dangerous areas where it is better not to enter. Inequality in New York skyrockets to ridiculous levels, making there be homeless people under skyscrapers whose owner has the money to buy 1,000 houses. This inequality creates many problems, such as muggers, drug use on the streets, scammers, etc. And we go with another point, the scammers who are truly everywhere, whether they offer you fixed gambling games or sell some product at an overprice, even costumed characters or people dressed up that are traps, because if you take a picture with them, they will end up charging you a lot of money, among many others. Now we go with a common problem in a city with such a large number of visitors. The attractions are saturated and more so if you go in high season when you find good weather, and you will have to make long lines for the most known attractions. All these things I mentioned are the biggest disappointments that people take from New York when visiting it because we must take into account that this city is very expensive. Accommodations, food, and attractions are not cheap, and for travelers on a tight budget or backpackers, this destination can be an uncomfortable and difficult place, and most likely, you will just see the attractions from afar. But well, it was too much to criticize the city. Now I will show you the good side of it because, of course, not everything is bad. New York is, as I said, an epicenter of attractions, having even without counting the main ones an endless number of famous restaurants or fast food places. You will see many places where movies were filmed, monuments that had an international relevance like the Empire State, which was the tallest building in the world for about 30 years, or the Statue of Liberty that was gifted by the French and is one of the most recognized monuments globally, or the monument to the Twin Towers, which was also a huge event in the world. Truly, the city has thousands of impressive stories that are reflected in streets, buildings, and monuments, in addition to attractions like Central Park, which is a park where just by walking you will find an endless number of interesting things. In addition to places like the Statue of Liberty Island where you have an impressive view of the city, Times Square, one of the most iconic places with all its screens and constant events, the One World Trade Center which is one of the tallest buildings and the one that was the replacement for the Twin Towers, as well as its many museums that have some of the most important in the country, and its many observatories that, believe me, here in them you will find some of the best views you will see in your life. Take the photo in the most iconic places, and if you look for attractions you will always find new ones. This makes New York feel like a city that, no matter how much you visit it, you will never fully know it 100%. And despite problems like crime, the problems of public transportation, and the immense chaos that the city transmits, even that has been romanticized and has been accepted as part of the culture of the city. I would really like to open a debate in the comments. Express your opinion and the image you have of the city, whether you have never visited it or have lived in it. In this way, we all learn and even that promotes improvement as a society. Thanks for watching the video, and if you liked it, leave your like to know if you like it and continue making this type of videos where we highlight the biggest problems of cities around the world and show the two faces. On the channel, we already have a video where we talk about Paris. If you are interested, it will be in the recommended at the end of the video. Thanks for watching and, without further ado, see you in the next video.